Imagine waking up in a bed carved from ivory, underneath a frescoed ceiling painting by the same hands that decorated the Vatican. A servant silently opens your velvet curtains. The morning sun pours in. Not that you notice, you're too busy inspecting a ruby the size of a quail's egg. You haven't worked a day in your life, but today you'll decide the fate of an artist, a duke, and perhaps a small republic. You'll bathe in rosewater, dine on imported peacock, and commission a cathedral, all before your second glass of wine. This was the life of the Renaissance 1%. While peasants shoveled dung and prayed for rain, a tiny elite lived like literal gods, draped in silk, drenched in perfume, and surrounded by art, luxury, and scandal. They weren't just rich, they invented rich. These were the Medici, the Borgias, the Sforzas, the Renaissance billionaires who bent the world to their will with coin, cunning, and a flair for the theatrical. You think today's billionaires are wild? They've got nothing on the Renaissance. Stay with us, and we'll pull back the damask curtain on the outrageous wealth, jaw-dropping indulgences, and the dangerous games of the men and women who ruled the Renaissance from golden thrones. The dawn of dynasties. Let's set the stage. Between the 14th and 17th centuries, Europe, especially Italy, was a playground for power and privilege. Banking exploded. Trade routes reached the east. The Black Death killed half the workforce, and the survivors realized they could charge double. The Renaissance, a celebrated era of artistic and intellectual rebirth, was also a period of profound economic transformation. As Europe emerged from the Middle Ages, new avenues for wealth creation concentrated fortunes in the hands of a few powerful families. These Renaissance billionaires wielded godlike influence, shaping nations, the papacy, and cultural evolution. Unlike feudal lords reliant on inherited land, these dynasties leveraged mercantile wealth, innovative banking, and strategic alliances to rival monarchs and the church. Wealth concentrated like never before, and out of that storm rose families who treated money like a divine right. This exploration examines four preeminent families: the Medici of Florence, Fuggers of Augsburg, Sforzas of Milan, and Borgias of Rome, whose ambition, innovation, and ruthlessness defined an age where wealth translated into omnipotence. Forging fortunes, the engines of wealth. The Medici of Florence, banking on divine connections. The Medici family rose to prominence in 13th century Florence through commerce and banking. Their Medici Bank, 1397 to 1494, became Europe's largest credit institution, driven by Giovanni de' Medici's financial innovations and risk management. His son, Cosimo the Elder, expanded the bank's network to Venice, Milan, London, and beyond, pioneering double-entry bookkeeping and bills of exchange. These innovations revolutionized trade, positioning the Medici as indispensable bankers to royalty and merchants, earning them the title God's bankers for their papal ties. Their strategic alignment with Pope Martin V and management of the Vatican's treasury granted them immense leverage, even using excommunication to pressure debtors. With three Medici popes, Leo X, Clement VII, and Leo XI, the family blurred divine and commercial authority, cementing their untouchable status. Their wealth? In today's money, hundreds of billions. They didn't just buy art, they bought history. Botticelli's Birth of Venus? Medici money. Michelangelo's David? Medici again. The Fuggers of Augsburg, masters of mines and monarchs. From humble weavers, the Fuggers became Europe's leading merchant bankers from the late 15th to early 17th century. Jakob II Fugger, the rich, shifted their focus from textiles to mining and loans, dominating Tyrolean and Hungarian copper and silver markets. By acquiring mines outright upon loan defaults, the Fuggers controlled vast resources. Their loans to Holy Roman Emperors Maximilian I and Charles V, and even popes, made them kingmakers, influencing imperial elections through bribes. Their financial might shaped European geopolitics, demonstrating how private wealth could direct state power on a continental scale. The Sforzas of Milan, from mercenary might to ducal rule. The Sforza family rose from farmers to rulers through military prowess. They were ruthless mercenaries turned aristocrats. Francesco Sforza seized Milan in 1450 via conquest and marriage to Bianca Maria Visconti, legitimizing his rule through governance. He restored Milan's economy, improved irrigation, and restructured bureaucracy. His son, Galeazzo Maria, promoted silk and wool industries, while Ludovico Sforza's diplomacy led to the 1454 Peace of Lodi, stabilizing Italy. His later support for the 1494 French invasion reshaped Italian politics. The Sforza's blend of military might, economic reform, and cultural patronage showcased a sophisticated model of divine-like rule. The Borgias of Rome, papal ambition and unchecked power. Technically clergy, but let's not pretend. They were more mafia than monastic. Originating from Valencia, Spain, the Borgias ascended through the church, with Alfonso de Borgia as Pope Calixtus III, and Rodrigo Borgia as Pope Alexander VI, 1492 to 1503. Alexander's nepotism enriched his children, Caesar and Lucrezia. Caesar, abandoning his cardinal role, conquered central Italy to form the Duchy of Romagna, inspiring Machiavelli's The Prince. The Borgias' control of the papacy allowed them to flout moral norms, exemplified by scandals like Banquet of Chestnuts. Their divine authority shielded their ruthless ambition, positioning them above earthly judgment. How rich were they, really? Let's talk numbers, and more importantly, let's talk absurdity. Modern billionaires buy yachts and social media apps. Renaissance billionaires, they hired Leonardo da Vinci full-time. Consider Cosimo de' Medici. By 1434, he was effectively ruling Florence without a crown. His bank operated branches in Rome, Venice, Bruges, London, and even Constantinople. His fortune? Roughly 100 to 150 billion in today's dollars. How did he spend it? He built libraries. He paid for the Dome of Florence Cathedral. He rescued artists from poverty and sometimes prison and set them loose on the canvas of history. Or take Lorenzo the Magnificent. The man financed Michelangelo when he was 13. He gave Botticelli a blank check. His household budget in 1471? Equivalent to $20 million a year, just for food, clothes, and entertainment. These were not men who clipped coupons. And don't even get us started on the Borgia Pope, Alexander VI. He practically bled gold. His papal court was so lavish that visiting dignitaries reported fainting at the smell. So much incense, perfume, and roasted game birds that the air itself became a narcotic. Living like deities, opulence, and grandeur. Now, let's go inside. Palaces, not houses. And these weren't just big. They were designed to overwhelm. These palaces weren't private. They were statements. You didn't just live in them, you performed in them. Every fresco, every statue whispered, "I am divine." The Renaissance elite's palaces were both residences and symbols of dominance. Palace boardrooms had canopy beds, tall enough to stage a duel underneath. Kitchens were stocked with spices worth more than gold. Bathrooms, yes, real ones, had plumbing systems that some towns wouldn't replicate for 400 years. In Florence, the Medici's Palazzo Medici Riccardi, 1444, designed by Michelangelo, concealed luxurious interiors behind a modest facade, had courtyards echoing with marble, gold coffered ceilings, and walls frescoed by Ghazali himself. Guests passed through chambers meant to humble, even terrify, lesser nobles. The Fuggers in Augsburg, 1512 to 1515, the first Renaissance-style building north of the Alps, featured opulent courtyards and Tuscan marble. In Milan, Ludovico Sforza transformed the Castello Forzesco into a Renaissance Versailles. He hosted lavish festivals. Leonardo painted his walls. Gold leaf was used like wallpaper. In Urbino, Federico di Montefeltro built a palace with a floating studiolo, a room of inlaid wood that still baffles modern craftsmen. The Borgia apartments in the Vatican, adorned with Pinturicchio's frescoes, blended Roman and Christian iconography. These structures were strategic propaganda, projecting divine legitimacy. These palaces weren't private, they were statements. You didn't just live in them, you performed in them. Every fresco, every statue whispered, "I am divine." Fashion as a royal decree. Now let's talk about fashion. These weren't tunics and togas, this was the runway of the gods. The Renaissance elite wore fabrics that could bankrupt a small town. Velvet, silk, brocade woven with gold thread. Buttons were made of pearls. Shoes were so expensive that they were kept under lock and key. Clothing was a powerful status symbol. The Medici wore gold brocades with silks, with women's layered gowns adorned with pearls, signaling wealth and exemption from labor. Cosimo Medici had cloaks that cost more than a house. Caterina Sforza, the Tiger of Forli, had gowns of crimson velvet lined with ermine, rare, illegal to wear if you weren't noble, and designed to make you look like royalty even when you were plotting a murder. They didn't just dress to impress, they dressed to intimidate. Colors like purple and crimson were reserved for the ruling elite. Wearing the wrong color could get you fined, or worse, stabbed for impersonating a duke. Catherine de' Medici introduced Italian fashion to France, influencing global trends. These sartorial choices reinforced the elite's godlike distinction from the masses. Jewelry wasn't accessorizing, it was armoring. Gold chains thick as serpents, rings crusted with gems, pendants containing relics, poisons, or little love notes from mistresses. Every outfit was a message. I am untouchable. Feasts, festivals, and spectacles, the theater of power. Hungry? Good, because the Renaissance 1% ate like ancient gods staging a feast for Saturn himself. Lavish banquets and spectacles displayed wealth and control. The Medici's Tuscan feasts showcased exotic imports, while Lorenzo de' Medici's carnival processions and jousts cost thousands of florins, fostering civic pride. The Borgias' scandalous banquet of chestnuts highlighted their impunity. These events distracted from political unrest, reinforcing the elite's divine authority. A Medici banquet wasn't just dinner, it was a theater of consumption. Picture this: peacock, roasted, then redressed in its own feathers and set aflame. Swan, stuffed with smaller birds, like a Renaissance turducken. Sugar sculptures, life-sized and gilded, were then smashed with jeweled mallets for dessert. Wine, imported from Greece, spiced with cinnamon and cloves that came across the Silk Road. Lorenzo de' Medici once threw a banquet with over 300 courses. It wasn't just about indulgence, it was about dominance, feeding your guests so extravagantly that they owed you their dignity. And don't forget table manners. Napkins were the size of tapestries, forks were still considered suspicious, real men used knives, fingers, and status. Patronage of the arts and sciences, immortalizing power. Why did they spend so much on art? Because art was propaganda. Commissioning a chapel wasn't about piety, it was about legacy. Patronage immortalized these family legacies. You weren't just saving your soul, you were building a monument to yourself. The Medici family funded Florence Cathedral's dome, Santa Maria Novella, St. Peter's Basilica, and artists like Botticelli and Michelangelo while supporting Galileo's scientific work. The Sforza paid Leonardo da Vinci to design war machines and paint ethereal portraits. The Borgias employed Pinturicchio and Raphael. They basically bribed the Renaissance to rewrite history in their favor. Art wasn't for museums, it was a political weapon. You gave a poor genius a bag of gold, and he gave you immortality. Even science was a rich man's game. Wealthy patrons funded anatomical studies, astronomical charts, and bizarre contraptions that would make Da Vinci's notebooks look like science fiction. And when things got political, these billionaires didn't play fair. They bought cardinals, they funded armies, they married off daughters like chess pieces, some even became popes. Power wasn't inherited, it was purchased. The reach of power, political puppeteers manipulating governments and elections. The Medici controlled Florence's republic covertly, using loans to sway politics. The Fuggers financed Charles V's imperial election, proving wealth's political might. The Sforzas stabilized Italy via the Peace of Lodi, while Ludovico's diplomacy sparked conflict. The Borgias leveraged the papacy for territorial gains, showing how wealth bent governance to their will. Beyond morality, ruthlessness, intrigue, and perceived impunity. Of course, all that gold came with a lot of dirt. The Renaissance elite had sins that would make Roman emperors blush. These families often transcended ethical norms. The Medici crushed the Pazzi conspiracy, obliterating rivals. The Borgias scandals, including alleged murders, shocked contemporaries, with Caesar's ruthlessness inspiring Machiavelli. Caesar murdered his brother, slept with his sister, allegedly, and had people dissolved in barrels of acid. Ludovico Sforza's alleged assassination of his nephew secured his rule. Their impunity, rooted in wealth and divine authority, detached them from moral constraints. Caterina Sforza held a fortress against a siege while pregnant, then told her enemies she could make more sons if they killed hers. Pope Alexander VI fathered at least 7 children and hosted orgies in the Vatican. He called them banquets, but yeah, sure, Your Holiness. Assassinations were common, spies were everywhere, guests at banquets sometimes never left, and poison was just another item in the spice rack. Even the good ones were dangerous. Lorenzo de' Medici was beloved, but he kept a hit list. Cosimo was called the father of the nation, but he ruled by blackmail and bribery. Being rich didn't mean being clean, it meant being untouchable. Societal impact, wealth disparity, and class transformation. The Renaissance saw rising economic inequality. While trade fostered a new middle class, the elite's opulence contrasted with widespread poverty. The Fuggers housing project mitigated some disparity, but their wealth often deepened social divides. Public works, driven by ambition or church appeasement, inadvertently advanced societal progress. An enduring legacy. And yet they gave us the Renaissance. Without their money, vanity, and ambition, there would be no Michelangelo, no Leonardo, no cathedrals rising like prayers in stone, no explosion of ideas that cracked open the medieval skull and let the light in. Their motives weren't pure, but their results were glorious. They shaped not just cities, but civilization. Art, architecture, science, politics, these men and women left fingerprints on every corner of the modern world. They may have lived like gods, but their shadows still stretch across time. Today, we gawk at tech billionaires building spaceships, buying islands, or renaming social media sites. But if you really want to understand the obscene power of wealth, the kind that rewrites history and reshapes the world, you've got to go back. Back to the marbled palaces, poisoned goblets, and fortunes measured in gold leaf and human lives. The Renaissance billionaires didn't just change history, they bought it. If you enjoyed this decadent descent into history's richest rogues, hit that like button. Subscribe to our channel, Epic Renaissance, for more tales of scandal, glory, and genius from the age where men lived like gods or died trying.